Have you ever felt guilty when you said no? Why do you flinch at conflict, even when you're right? Why does standing your ground feel like a crime? You weren't born soft. You were made soft, trained to smile when you want to scream, to apologize for your needs, to feel shame whenever you show strength. Machiavelli didn't fear evil, he feared weakness dressed as virtue. Because when the world wants to control you, it doesn't chain your body, it tames your soul. And the taming always starts with a lie, that being dangerous makes you bad, when in truth, it's the only way to stay free. It starts before you remember, not with words but with glances. The adult faces stiffen when you shout too loud, cry too hard, or move too boldly. They say, be careful when you run. They say, be nice when you're hurt. They say, don't be difficult when you say no. And so you learn, without ever being told, that safety doesn't come from truth, it comes from being liked. You learn to trade strength for belonging, conviction for approval, fire for quiet acceptance, not because you're weak, but because being soft kept you loved. Machiavelli saw it clearly. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both, because love can be withdrawn. Fear earns space, and space is power. But they don't teach you that. They teach you to please, so you don't disrupt the machine. And that's how strength becomes suspicious. Confidence becomes arrogance, and obedience, that becomes a virtue. They don't need chains when they can build a conscience inside you, a conscience that whispers, don't upset them, don't ask for too much, don't take up space. This is not morality, it's manipulation. Because the good man they praise is never the one who speaks truth. He's the one who behaves, who bends, who doesn't fight back when the world humiliates him. This is what Machiavelli feared, a society that no longer needed tyrants because the people had been taught to police themselves. He wrote, men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear. But in our world, they don't need to frighten you. They just convince you that your fire is dangerous, that your instincts are uncivilized, that your anger makes you bad. So you internalize it, you apologize for your needs, you flatten your spine, and you call it growth. You were never meant to be nice, you were meant to be real. But today, niceness is currency. You trade it for jobs, dates, promotions, peace. You smile even when you feel hollow. You agree when everything in you screams no. You let things go that are killing you inside. Why? Because you were taught to equate discomfort with guilt, to fear rejection more than you fear betrayal, to keep the peace, even when it's war inside you. Niccolo warned us centuries ago, a man who strives after goodness in all his acts is sure to come to ruin. Because goodness as sold to you is not about justice, it's about passivity. You weren't taught to protect yourself, you were taught to be palatable, digestible, safe. But you are not meant to be safe, you are meant to be whole. Look around, we live in a culture that rewards fragility, as long as it's quiet. Be vulnerable, but not too raw. Be authentic, but not too intense. Be bold, but never threatening. And if you suffer, suffer beautifully, suffer aesthetically, suffer in a way that gets likes, but doesn't disrupt anything. This is the new power structure. It doesn't punish you with force. It rewards you for being soft, because the softer you are, the easier you are to mold. The less you expect, the more you'll tolerate. And the more you question your worth, the harder you'll work to prove it, to bosses, to strangers, to algorithms, and the cycle continues. Machiavelli knew, the wise man does at once what the fool does finally. But you've been trained to delay your instincts, to second-guess your gut, to wait for permission that will never come. Now think about it. What if your guilt isn't a sign of morality, but proof that your strength has been caged? In the next chapter, we'll expose how power disguises itself as love, and why your fear of being disliked is the oldest weapon ever used against you. You don't need chains when you've got shame. Shame teaches you to betray yourself before anyone else has to. It keeps you quiet when you want to scream. It makes you apologize for your anger, your desires, your ambition. It convinces you that your instincts are wrong. that wanting more makes you greedy, that protecting yourself makes you selfish. But that's not morality, that's social engineering. Because the more ashamed you feel of your natural strength, the more easily you're controlled. You want rest, but guilt tells you to keep working. You want to say no, but guilt whispers you'll hurt them. You want to walk away, but shame reminds you that good people stay. And so you stay, not because it's right, but because you've been conditioned to feel wrong for leaving. This is how weakness becomes a virtue, not through punishment, but through praise. They tell you, you're so humble, you're so easygoing, you're so nice. What they mean is, you're easy to manage, you don't take up space, you don't make demands. And the second you stop being that way, suddenly you're too much, too intense, hard to love. You've been sold a picture of balance, the emotionally intelligent man, the composed, rational, flexible man, the evolved man who doesn't get angry, doesn't argue, doesn't dominate. Sounds good, right? But here's the trap. It only works one way. They don't want your balance, they want your compliance. They want you restrained, filtered, defanged. Because a man with fire is unpredictable. A man with conviction is dangerous. A man who won't beg to be understood cannot be controlled. Machiavelli said, "He who becomes a master of dissimulation is always powerful." And this is the ultimate dissimulation. They pretend they want you strong, as long as that strength is silent. They call it balance. But what they want is obedience, dressed up as emotional intelligence. Because the moment your strength threatens their comfort, suddenly you're toxic, you're aggressive, you're not safe. And so you learn to apologize for your passion. You dilute your opinions. You nod when you want to roar. Not because you're kind, but because you've been taught that being real means being rejected. Love is the most powerful weapon ever forged, because once they convince you that love must be earned, you'll do anything to keep it. You'll betray yourself. You'll silence your needs. You'll morph into the shape they prefer, smaller, softer, less demanding. This isn't love, it's training. They teach you that unconditional love means unconditional forgiveness, that loving others means accepting everything, even disrespect, that boundaries are cold and conflict is unspiritual. But Machiavelli never believed love was pure. He saw love as a tool of leverage, a way for rulers to pacify the people, a way to cloak submission in comfort. Because when they say, "We're doing this for your own good," they're not helping you, they're managing you. And when they say, "Love means compromise," what they really mean is, "Change yourself so I don't have to face mine." That's not connection, that's containment. Guilt is the leash they use when love stops working. You're guilted into attending events you don't want to go to, guilted into staying in jobs that kill your spirit, guilted into staying quiet when you see injustice because you don't want to cause trouble. And the worst part? You start doing it to yourself. You guilt trip yourself out of rest. You shame yourself for having needs. You punish yourself for feeling powerful. You've internalized the control. Now they don't even need to tell you what to do. You do it automatically to avoid the guilt. That's the genius of the system. It convinces you that your suffering is a sign of your goodness, that your weakness makes you lovable, that your silence makes you safe. Machiavelli warned, a prince never lacks legitimate reasons to break his promise. And the modern system? It breaks every promise it made to you about success, fulfillment, love, and blames you for not being enough. If love can be weaponized and guilt can be installed like a virus, then how do you even begin to break free? You'll find the answer not in softness, but in the return of your edge. Because the next truth you need to hear is the one they worked hardest to bury. They don't fear your flaws, they fear your clarity. Because once you know who you are, truly, you stop asking for permission. And that's terrifying. It's not your anger that scares them. It's your refusal to explain it. It's not your ambition that threatens them. It's your unwillingness to shrink it. Because when a man wakes up from the trance of people-pleasing, he becomes unpredictable. He no longer nods out of politeness. He doesn't fake smiles to maintain peace. He doesn't say, "I understand," when he doesn't. They want you predictable because predictability is safe for them. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." But modern men were taught to reverse this. You were told, don't be intimidating, you'll scare people, tone it down, but you can't become whole by deleting your fire. And the truth is, fear and love aren't enemies. They're both forms of respect. Nice guys don't finish last. They never even showed up to the real race. Because nice is not a virtue. It's a survival strategy. It's code for non-threatening. It's what boys learn when they're punished for being too loud, too intense, too honest. So instead of growing strong, they grow careful. Careful not to upset, careful not to challenge, careful not to be rejected. But nice never leads to admiration. It leads to resentment. You give endlessly, and they call you needy. You listen endlessly, and they call you boring. You agree endlessly, and they forget you exist. Why? Because you never showed them who you really are, only who you thought they wanted. And the second you stop performing, people say, you've changed. Good. Because that version of you wasn't alive. It was a hostage. You're not here to be nice. You're here to be whole. And wholeness includes darkness, the part of you that sets boundaries without guilt, the part that walks away without over-explaining, the part that says no without a smile. That part of you has been starved, and Machiavelli would say, feed it, because without your shadow, your light is impotent. Without your backbone, your compassion is empty. Without your edge, your peace is fake. You don't find strength through removal, you find it through reclamation. Reclaim the parts you buried to fit in. Reclaim the words you swallowed to keep the peace. Reclaim the man you were before they convinced you to be small. This is the return of the sovereign self, not a self that waits to be loved, but one that commands respect, not a self that explains his worth, but one that embodies it. You've seen this before. A man speaks with conviction, they call him arrogant. A man refuses to chase, they call him cold. A man demands respect, they call him difficult. But that's not a flaw in you, it's a tactic from them. Machiavelli knew, when you can't defeat power, you discredit it. So they mock masculinity as toxic. They label strength as danger. They sell comfort as enlightenment. Because if they can't break you, they'll convince you to break yourself. You stop raising your voice. You stop asserting your truth. You start asking for permission again. Until one day you wake up and realize you've been apologizing for being exactly what you were born to be. And this is what they feared most. A man who doesn't need their approval. A man who doesn't confuse shame with ethics. A man who doesn't fold himself to fit into smaller rooms. The truth is, you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to lead. But first you have to dismantle the trap they built inside your own mind, the one that taught you to fear your power instead of mastering it. The blueprint for freedom has been buried, but not lost. The next step is unlearning everything you were told about strength and rewriting it from the source. Modern society doesn't whip you into submission. It bribes you with comfort, with likes, with approval, and slowly your nervous system adapts. You start chasing dopamine instead of dignity. Every time you please someone, it feels good. Every time you're liked, it feels safe. Every time you're quiet, it feels strategic. But these aren't values. They're reflexes. You've been rewired to obey without realizing it, to crave the buzz of validation, to fear the silence of disapproval. Machiavelli never trusted surface-level morality because he knew most people weren't acting ethically. They were acting strategically. And the greatest strategy they've deployed? Convincing you that your natural strength is dangerous, but their control is love. So you trade assertiveness for agreeableness. You trade independence for relatability. You trade your edge for applause, until there's nothing left of you but a smiling echo. At first you smiled to survive. You said yes to stay safe. You shrank to avoid punishment. But over time, the mask fused to your face. You forgot it was a mask. Now you perform politeness even when you're angry. You nod along, even when your soul screams no. You praise others while silently starving for respect. And the worst part, you don't even remember why. Machiavelli warned, "He who becomes a prince through the favor of the people must always keep them friendly." But in your life, you've made yourself the prince of pleasing. You ruled no one except your own suppressed instincts, and your kingdom was built on eggshells. You don't need to rule people, but you do need to rule yourself, not with cruelty, with clarity, not with dominance, with direction. It's time to peel the mask off, even if it rips skin, because behind it isn't a monster. It's the real you, raw, rare, and dangerous in the best way. Ever notice how society doesn't just disagree with strong men, it shames them? You're told not just that you're wrong, but that you're bad, toxic, problematic, outdated, because shame is more powerful than law. It doesn't just stop you, it rewrites you. You censor yourself before they do. You tone yourself down before anyone complains. You become the warden of your own soul. Machiavelli said, "The vulgar crowd always is taken by appearances, and the world consists chiefly of the vulgar." Which means the crowd doesn't want truth, it wants comfort. And if your presence makes them confront something uncomfortable, they won't examine themselves. They'll exile you. That's why being powerful feels wrong, because they built a morality around your submission. They didn't outlaw strength. They made you hate yourself for having it. And once you've internalized that, you don't need chains. You become your own cage. But here's the fracture in their plan. The thing Machiavelli always knew. A man can only play weak for so long. Eventually, something deeper calls him back. Not ego, not anger, but instinct. And once that instinct wakes up, no system, no shame, no softening can put him back to sleep. There comes a point when the performance breaks, when you can't smile through another meeting, can't say no worries when you've been disrespected, can't nod along when everything inside you screams enough. That's not ego, that's awakening. The return of the unapologetic man isn't loud, it's not a flex, it's a remembering. You don't need to shout, you don't need to prove, you just stop asking to exist. You don't soften your tone to keep peace, you don't dim your opinions to be liked, you don't filter your boundaries through guilt. Machiavelli never glorified cruelty, but he respected clarity, and clarity is the first act of power, to say, "This is where I stand," to say, "I will not move unless I choose to say, "Your discomfort is not my responsibility." The world fears men who speak like this, not because they're dangerous, but because they're free, and a free man cannot be bought, cannot be shamed, cannot be steered. Machiavelli famously wrote, "A prince must learn to imitate both the fox and the lion, for the lion cannot defend himself against snares, and the fox cannot defend himself against wolves." Most men are trained to be neither. They're raised to be sheep, trained to be quiet, agreeable, safe. But Machiavelli's wisdom is still alive, not in the political halls of power, but in the hearts of those who are done playing nice. The fox is strategy, the lion is presence. You need both, to see through manipulation and stand your ground anyway, to predict betrayal and still speak directly, to stay silent not out of fear, but choice. True strength isn't loud, it's prepared. You don't bark, you wait. You don't fight every battle, you pick the one that matters. You don't live in rage, you live in readiness. And when the world sees that look in your eyes, the calm, dangerous clarity of a man who can but chooses not to, that's when they know you're no longer theirs to shape. There's a kind of power that doesn't need applause. You don't post it, you don't announce it, you don't decorate it in poetic language. You just are. And when you walk in the room, people feel it, not because you try to intimidate them, but because you don't need them. The approval, the permission, the nod, you've stopped chasing it. You speak truth, even if it costs you. You hold your line, even if it gets lonely. You walk away, even if they beg you to stay. And that's the moment it all changes, because now you're not chasing safety, you've become it. You're not looking for a leader, you've become your own. Machiavelli's words echo again here. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. But in your life, you are both ruler and ruled. So ask, what kind of man are you building inside yourself? What kind of decisions surround your daily rituals? What kind of silence do you keep, cowardly or calm? If the answers don't make you proud, the time to change isn't tomorrow. It's the next time you feel that old temptation to shrink, because you're not too much, you're not too intense, you're just not owned anymore. Strength isn't cold, it's not cruel, it's not controlling, it's kind but firm, it's soft but anchored, it's open but unshakable. You don't need to bark to protect your boundary, you don't need to posture to show your value, you don't need to threaten to prove your worth, you just exist, fully, and that's enough. But that only happens when you stop giving your soul away in pieces. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you laugh at a joke that disrespects you, every time you stay silent to keep the fake peace. Strength is saying, no, I'm not doing that. Yes, I believe this. Walk away if you don't like it. I'm not shrinking to fit you. That's the man the world fears, because that man cannot be managed. He can be respected, hated, challenged, but never controlled. And for once in your life, maybe that's exactly who you need to be. And when that version of you shows up consistently, calm, clear, and untamed, you don't just free yourself. You give every silent man around you permission to rise. One spark, that's all it takes. And the system that built itself on your softness starts to shake. You don't need a movement. You don't need a stage. You don't need permission. You need to stand once when everything inside you says kneel. That's where it begins. Not with followers, but with spine. Not with applause, but with stillness. Not with a roar, but with a refusal. This is how real revolutions start. Not in crowds, but in men. In one man saying, I see what you're doing, and I'm done playing along. In one man walking away from a room where he's tolerated. In one man choosing to honor his peace over their expectations. And then another man sees it, and another, and another. Machiavelli didn't believe the masses spark change. He believed the courageous few did, the ones willing to be hated, willing to lose comfort, willing to walk alone. And once you feel that fire, not the noise, not the hype, but the still, unmovable clarity of living by your own code, you never go back. If you stop rescuing people who drain you, if you stop apologizing for your ambition, if you stop explaining your decisions to people who never earned that access, they will call you arrogant, selfish, cold. Let them. This is the price of ownership, of boundaries, of power. Machiavelli knew that if you want to stay soft, you must first learn how to stay strong. It is better to be feared than loved, he said. But what he meant was deeper than fear. He meant that respect cannot be built on weakness. If you want love that isn't pity, if you want connection that isn't codependence, if you want purpose that isn't slavery, then you have to stop flinching when they call you names, because they don't hate your power. They hate that they can't use you anymore. They want access to your mind, your time, your energy, your emotion, and the most dangerous power you'll ever gain is the ability to say, no, you don't get in. Not with guilt, not with pressure, not with praise. The truly dangerous man isn't the one who bites. It's the one who can walk away without blinking. Because that kind of man, he's not just physically free, he's emotionally unreachable. You don't owe anyone your vulnerability. You don't owe the world your softness. You don't have to leak your life into hands that only hold you when it's convenient. You are not a product. You are not a performance. You are not a permission slip. You are a man who decided to stop leaking his strength for approval. And from that place, everything changes. Here's what they never told you. They don't fear your darkness. They don't fear your flaws. They fear your clarity. The world is terrified of a man who knows what he wants, moves toward it, and doesn't need to explain it. Because that kind of man can't be marketed to. He doesn't fall for shame. He doesn't play the fix-yourself game on repeat. He He just walks, calm, intentional, free. And maybe that's why the world works so hard to keep you confused. Because clarity is dangerous, discipline is threatening, and unapologetic masculinity, rooted in stillness, not chaos, breaks systems built on manipulation. Machiavelli's final gift wasn't just strategy, it was the courage to choose clarity over comfort. And maybe that's your path now, not to scream, not to burn it all down, but to look at the life you've been told to want and say, I don't need this, I need something real. That's not rebellion, that's return. Return to your mind, return to your strength, return to the part of you that was never weak, only buried. If this resonated with something buried deep, if even one idea in this video helped you see more clearly, then don't let it fade. Like the video, leave a comment, subscribe, and join our community of seekers, people walking toward truth, not away from it. Until next time, keep shining, not to be seen, but to see.